People like you don't belong in neighborhoods like this. That was the very first thing Karen said to me. No, hello, no, welcome to the community, just that cold, racist remark as she stood there on the sidewalk, arms crossed, like she owned the entire block. I had just stepped out of my car boxes, still in the trunk, when her words hit me like a slap. Her eyes scanned me head to toe, full of disdain, before she added with a smirk, "Don't take it the wrong way, but we like to keep this area safe and clean." What Karen didn't know was that I wasn't some newcomer she could bully with her petty rules and her fake HOA authority. I wasn't just another black homeowner she thought she could intimidate. I was a federal judge, and every insult, every act of discrimination she threw my way was going to come back at her harder than she could ever imagine. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where are you watching from and what time is it right now. Karen didn't linger after her opening salvo. She pivoted into a performance. She produced a glossy folder stamped with the HOA logo, holding it like a church hymnal. "Welcome packet," she chirped to the couple, walking their golden retriever, her voice warm honey. Then she turned to me and switched to decaf new resident reminders. Same folder, different tone. I'd tried cases where the truth lived in inflection more than words. This was one of those times. Inside the packet, the first page wasn't a greeting, but a warning. Aesthetic cohesion guidelines, 47 bullet points on things like approved neutral tones and limitations on visible musical equipment. It read less like community standards and more like a personality test for control. Karen tapped the section on curb presentation as if blessing it. "We keep a certain look here," she said, eyes sliding over my skin before snapping back to the print. "It keeps the neighborhood safe." "I'm a big fan of safe," I answered, smiling. "You'd be surprised how much of my life is about that." 2 lawn chairs away, the dog-walking couple Ryan and his wife Megan smiled apologetically the way people do when they watch a glass fall and can't decide whether to catch it. "If you need anything," Megan said, bright and brittle, "we're at number 12. "Good to meet you," Karen sang to them. "You two are just a delight." Back to me. "Are you renting? We've had issues with subleasing." "I own it," I said. A beat. "Well," she replied, forcing a smile so tight it seemed stapled on congratulations. The rumors started the same day the keys hit my palm. An email blast titled, "Friendly reminder we don't street park." Overnight, with a photo of a random sedan mine attached, even though 3 trucks further down had camped on the curb all week like squatters in Chrome. A neighborhood watch post on the app I never downloaded. "Please remember to verify delivery drivers and unknown persons lingering after dark." The unknown person was me on my lawn calling the vendor who'd sent me the wrong size blinds. Karen was everywhere and nowhere. I would lift a box and she'd glide past in a golf cart clipboard balanced on her lap like a judge's bench. She always had a pen, always clicked it like punctuation. Click when my trash bin wandered 12 inches left of the invisible line behind the side gate. Click when my mailbox, a handsome oil-rubbed bronze, failed her satin nickel vision. Click when I parked across my own driveway while the movers jockeyed the sofa through the door. "We have standards," she'd say, and the pen would click again, tiny gavel strikes on paper. I kept my replies gentle. Not submissive gentle. In my courtroom I call it letting a witness talk. Here I was letting Karen give me rope. Every email she sent went into a folder. Every courtesy notice got photographed. The HOA handbook version, dated 3 years ago, sat on my kitchen island, open to a dog-eared page about reasonable discretion that she'd underlined in a different font in her printed copy. I printed both and laid them side by side. Discretion is a marvelous thing until it gets measured by melanin. The first package arrived 2 days later, a brown rectangle with my name across the label, intercepted by Karen as if the sidewalk were her customs checkpoint. She waved me down from my porch like an air traffic controller. "We've had theft," she announced, clutching the box. "Identity verification helps." "I'm happy to verify my identity," I said, walking toward her. "My government ID is particularly persuasive." She laughed the way people do when they think you're joking and hope you are. "No need, I'm sure. Just remember to pick these up quickly in the future. We can't have packages sitting out. It looks unkempt." I blacked out the barcode on the shipping label and photographed the scene, the box, her golf cart, the timestamp from my doorbell camera. Later, I watched the footage of her slowing reading, deciding, intent has a posture. It leans forward right before it turns ugly. That evening, I took a walk. The air-cooled sprinklers whispered along manicured lawns, and somewhere a child's laughter tripped along the sidewalk like a wind chime. I was halfway down the block when Karen's SUV drifted behind me unhurried. The window lowered 2 inches. "Everything okay," she called, voice, all neighborhood safety, PSA. "Couldn't be better," I said. "You know we've had incidents," she added, letting the word linger like fog. "People wandering." I'm people, I said. She didn't like that answer. The window slid up. I met more neighbors, Mr. Whitaker 80, if a day, who wore a veteran's cap and a weathered kindness. Welcome, son, he said low enough that Karen, somehow within earshot, couldn't catch it. Keep your head up. Lucy across the street handed me a slice of lemon pound cake and a whisper. She runs this place like it's her sorority. If she thinks you won't push back, she'll push harder. I thanked them both. Sympathy is sweet, but sworn statements are sweeter. Still, it told me something I already knew. Fear is a powerful HOA bylaw. 2 courtesy notices arrived in my inbox the next morning like airport delays. One for bin visibility. My bin had been visible for exactly 3 minutes while I wrestled it behind the gate. My doorbell camera said so. Another for driveway darkness, a phrase that sounded less like landscaping and more like a Freudian slip. Across the street, 2 bins camped out all day, and a tangle of bicycles lay like driftwood on the grass of a house that wasn't mine. I took photos. Always photos. Date, time, comparative properties. If law school teaches you anything, it's that memory is a magician, evidence is a mirror. Karen tried charm again where she thought it counted. She waved like a parade grand marshal at the Pilates moms and aimed sunshine at the retired couple who'd lived here since the 92nd. With me, she practiced polite suspicion. Have you reviewed the acceptable paint palette, she asked, hovering, as I examined exterior swatches. We know what works in this community. I'm partial to colors that don't fade in the heat, I said. But I'll check your list. It's not my list, she said too quickly. It's the community's. A beat later, she added, I helped revise it last year. I glanced at the date on the document she handed me, updated 6 months ago after a decade without changes, and filed that away. Revisions tell you what someone cares about. This list had grown a new appendix for the length of porch furniture and a veto on amplified sound audible at the sidewalk. I wondered who had been playing music and what kind. By the end of week 1, I had a story made of fragments, emails with polite poison policies, with elastic edges, conversations that wilted when Karen entered the frame. I also had a plan. I installed a second camera that covered the strip between the sidewalk and the curb and made sure my floodlights met lumen limits while illuminating every inch of my frontage like a stage. Not to intimidate, just to see. That's when the community potluck and Q&A flyer appeared taped to my mailbox flag against Rule 12B. No adhesives on postal equipment, but rules are clay in Karen's hands. New resident welcome, it read, with a smiley face that tried too hard. In smaller print, we'll go over expectations for maintaining our neighborhood's character. The word character did a lot of work in that sentence. There was also a line about time for questions, which translated from Karen's speak meant time to publicly shame the person who doesn't fit my storyboard. I RSVP'd immediately. I'll be there, I wrote. I'll bring potato salad. And I didn't add, but absolutely meant I'll bring receipts. As I hit send, another email from Karen slid into my inbox like a jealous cat. Please note, per page 14, no lawn decorations without prior approval. Attached a photo of the small bronze sculpture my niece made me, a spiral of metal about the size of a cantaloupe. It sat near the porch step catching light. Beautiful, harmless, inconvenient to her imagination of me. I replied with a screenshot of page 14 and a highlighted clause about temporary art during move-in. Thanks for the reminder, I wrote. I'll submit the form anyway. My thumb hovered over the keyboard a second longer. In court, you never say more than you need to. Here, I let myself add a single line, pleasant as lemonade and twice as tart. I appreciate your commitment to fairness. I intend to meet it. The potluck was in 2 days. Karen would bring the rules. I would bring the record. One of us would be surprised. The potluck was supposed to be a friendly gathering, but from the moment I walked into the community hall with my bowl of potato salad, I could feel it wasn't going to be about food. Karen stood in the center of the room like she'd bought the place. Her pastel cardigan hung neatly over her shoulders, and the infamous clipboard was tucked tight against her chest. The way she looked at me as I came through the door, you'd think I'd tracked mud across her perfect beige carpet. Neighbors milled about with paper plates trying to act casual, but the hush that followed me to the buffet table said it all. Karen raised her voice high and cheerful. Everyone, we have a new neighbor. Let's welcome him to our community. For half a second, it almost sounded genuine, but then she laced her words with that syrupy warning. We all know how important it is to protect the character of our neighborhood. Her eyes cut toward me on that last word, sharp enough that no one missed her meaning. I set my dish down and smiled back at her, speaking loud enough that the whole room could hear. I'm glad to be here. I like rules that make sense. The ripple of half-stifled laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was enough to wipe the smirk from her face. Karen wasted no time getting to the real show. After the food, she tapped her pen against the clipboard like a gavel commanding attention. Before dessert, she began, we need to discuss some concerns. Nothing personal, of course. Every word was aimed directly at me. She held up a photo of my trash bin cropped so tightly you couldn't see it had only been out for a few minutes. Violation, she said flatly. She flipped to the next page. My mailbox, not the approved finish. Another page, my niece's bronze sculpture. Unapproved ornament. One by one, she laid them out like charges in a trial, and I was the only defendant. The room shifted. Forks scraped plates, throats, cleared eyes darted between me and her. Everyone could see what she was doing, but no one wanted to stand in the crossfire. Karen straightened, delivering her closing argument with a self-satisfied smile. When one home looks out of place, it affects property values for everyone. She didn't say my name. She didn't need to. And then came the slip. Maybe she'd gotten too comfortable, or maybe she just thought no one would call her on it. Her voice dropped sharp and cutting. We've always prided ourselves on keeping this neighborhood safe and clean. We don't want it looking like certain parts of town. The pause after certain parts was deliberate, her eyes resting on me like a spotlight. The meaning was obvious. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. Mr. Whitaker, the old veteran with the weathered ball cap, coughed and muttered, "That's enough." But his voice was small compared to hers. Megan from across the street lowered her eyes, clearly ashamed but too timid to speak. A couple of others fidgeted with their cups shifting in their chairs. The air was thick with the kind of fear that keeps people quiet, the fear of being her next target. I sat there, calm, my phone face down on the table, recording every word. Years in court had trained me not to react, not to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. My heartbeat was steady, my smile mild. But inside, I was already filing her comments under Exhibit A. She thought she was humiliating me in public. She didn't realize she was handing me the very evidence I would use to take her apart. Karen must have taken the silence as support because she carried on like she'd won something. She beamed at the room, oblivious to the discomfort she'd stirred, and chirped. Now who's ready for dessert? The tension broke, people moved toward the brownies and pies, and just like that, the meeting shifted back to small talk and polite laughter. But nothing about it was normal anymore. Every person in that room had heard what she said. Some had chosen to laugh, some had chosen to look away, and one man had chosen to remember. I left the potluck with a plate of lemon bars wrapped in foil and a folder full of ammunition. The night had been Karen's attempt to put me in my place. Instead, she'd put herself on record. She thought she'd tightened the leash around my neck. What she didn't see was the noose forming around her own. The morning after the potluck, Karen strutted past my driveway with the same energy as a prosecutor after a guilty verdict. She didn't bother waving. She simply snapped a photo of my front yard, with her phone scribbled something on her clipboard, and carried on like she was patrolling a crime scene. To anyone else, it might have looked like diligence. To me, it was harassment disguised as community service. I sipped my coffee from the porch, letting her have her little show. She wanted me angry, wanted me to argue, and give her another story to spin in the HOA newsletter. What she didn't know was that silence can be louder than shouting. Silence makes bullies reveal themselves. By that afternoon, an email hit my inbox with the subject line, "Notice of Repeat Violations." 3 attachments, 3 photos, all taken within minutes of each other. My trash bin again captured while I was pulling it in. My car nosed slightly over the sidewalk as I loaded groceries, and a close-up of the bronze sculpture, which she now described as hazardous debris. I filed the email neatly in my evidence folder, time-stamped it, and added a short note, "Pattern of discrimination, escalating." I'd handled cases where a slip of the tongue or a poorly timed memo made the difference between innocence and liability. Karen was building my case for me brick by brick, violation by violation. I almost admired her commitment to self-destruction. That night, as I took a walk under the soft glow of the street lamps, a squad car rolled slowly down the block. My stomach sank even before the officer stepped out. "Sir," he called, "we got a report of a suspicious individual walking around." His flashlight beam hovered at my chest, then climbed to my face. I raised my hands just enough to make my point clear. "This is my neighborhood," I said calmly. "That's my house right there." The officer's expression shifted, uncertain, maybe even embarrassed, but protocol kept him firm. "We still have to respond to calls." I knew exactly who had made that call. She didn't even hide it. From across the street, Karen stood on her porch, phone in hand, watching like she'd ordered takeout and was waiting for delivery. "Everything okay here, officer?" she shouted, voice dripping with false concern. "We've had problems lately." The cop gave her a look I couldn't quite read, then turned back to me. "Sorry to bother you. Have a good evening." He climbed back into his car and rolled away. I walked inside without another word, but my mind was already spinning. Calling the police on me for walking in my own neighborhood wasn't just petty, it was dangerous, and it was another piece of evidence. I saved the doorbell footage of the cruiser pulling up the audio of Karen's voice carrying across the lawn. Exhibit B. Over the next week, her campaign grew bolder. I received 3 more courtesy notices, each more ridiculous than the last. One accused me of violating noise regulations at 2:00 a.m., a time when I was asleep, and my security system proved the house had been silent. Another claimed my porch light was too bright, even though the wattage was well within the limit. The third said my lawn was not uniform despite the fact that I'd hired the same landscaping company half the neighborhood used. I responded to none of them. Instead, I printed each notice, highlighted the contradictions, and slipped them into a binder labeled HOA Karen Evidence. It was thickening quickly. What Karen didn't know was that I'd already reached out to HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. A quiet phone call, a careful explanation, and a promise to provide documentation had set the wheels turning. The investigator on the other end of the line didn't sound surprised. He'd heard stories like mine before. "You'll want to keep a log," he advised. "Every comment, every notice, every incident. The more detail, the stronger the case." I almost laughed. If Karen thought her clipboard was powerful, she'd never seen a federal case file. Meanwhile, neighbors were starting to whisper. Megan waved me over one afternoon as I checked the mail. "She's targeting you," she said quietly, eyes darting toward Karen's house. "She's always been controlling, but it feels different." "She's not subtle," I replied. "People are scared to speak up," Megan admitted. "She finds everyone for little things, but with you, it's worse. It's personal." Personal was exactly the word. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules, she was twisting them into weapons. And every jab, every reminder carried the same unspoken message: you don't belong here. One evening, I caught her in the act. My phone buzzed with a motion alert from the side yard camera. I opened the app and there she was, Karen crouched near my recycling bin, snapping a photo with her flash on. She scurried off like a teenager, egging houses, only she was in her 50s, and carried a clipboard instead of spray paint. The footage was crystal clear. Timestamp location, her face lit by the glare of her own phone. I forwarded it straight into my evidence folder, Exhibit C. I thought about knocking on her door, confronting her directly, but then I remembered the first rule of strategy: never interrupt your opponent when they're making a mistake. Karen was writing my closing argument one act at a time. By the second week, I'd stopped feeling angry. What I felt was focus. Her insults at the potluck, her bogus violation letters, her calls to the police, none of it rattled me anymore. If anything, it clarified my path. The more she pressed, the more I prepared. She believed she was tightening her grip, but in reality she was tightening the rope around her own neck. The funny part, she thought I was powerless. She thought the silence meant defeat. But I wasn't silent, I was documenting. I wasn't retreating, I was building a case. And when the time came, I wouldn't just defend myself. I'd dismantle her entire kingdom of fake authority, rule by rule, word by word. For now, I smiled when she drove past in her golf cart, clipboard in her lap, pen clicking like a metronome of menace. I waved politely. She smirked, certain she was winning. Let her think it. Because the higher she built her tower of arrogance, the harder it would crash when I finally struck back. It didn't take long for Karen to escalate from quiet harassment to full-scale theater. If the potluck had been her dress rehearsal, then the special HOA meeting she called 2 weeks later was her big premiere. Flyers appeared in every mailbox, printed on pastel paper with cheerful clip art, like we were all about to plan a community bake sale. But the headline gave it away: urgent meeting addressing compliance concerns. Neighbors shuffled into the clubhouse on a Thursday evening, some curious, some already weary. I took a seat near the middle binder of evidence tucked under my arm. I didn't plan to use it yet. Tonight my goal was simple: watch her reveal herself. Karen walked in like she owned the stage. She wore a blazer this time, as if she'd been promoted from neighborhood busybody to corporate tyrant. Clipboard in one hand, a thick stack of violation notices in the other. She cleared her throat and the room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice dripping with importance. "As president of this HOA, it's my duty to protect the integrity of our neighborhood. Lately, however, we've experienced issues that threaten our property values and our sense of safety." Her eyes locked on me. No subtlety this time. She laid the stack of papers on the table with a dramatic thud. "One homeowner in particular has repeatedly violated our community standards despite numerous warnings." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors turned to glance at me, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Karen started reading aloud each infraction like an indictment: trash bin visibility, mailbox finish, suspicious loitering, improper lawn ornament. She even resurrected the bogus noise complaint from 2 a.m. "We cannot allow one resident to disregard the rules we all follow," she declared. "If this continues, we may have to consider fines, liens, even foreclosure." That last word landed like a hammer. Foreclosure. She wasn't just wagging her finger anymore. She was threatening to take my home. I stayed quiet, arms folded, my face a mask of calm. Inside, my pulse was steady, deliberate, the way it always was when a courtroom grew heated. You never show your hand too early. Then Karen went further. Her voice hardened, dropping the veneer of politeness. "We've always kept this neighborhood safe, clean, and desirable. We can't afford to let it slide into... Well, we know what happens when standards aren't enforced. Certain neighborhoods start to change." The words hung heavy in the air. No one needed a translator. She wasn't talking about lawn care. She was talking about race, about me. Gasps echoed from a few corners of the room. Megan shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. "Mister," Whitaker muttered under his breath. But no one spoke loud enough to stop her. Karen leaned forward, eyes gleaming as if daring me to react. "We can't let one person lower the quality of life for everyone else," she said, voice rising. "If you can't respect our rules, maybe you don't belong here." The silence was deafening. All eyes turned to me. This was the moment she'd been pushing for since the day I moved in the public, shaming the spectacle of power. She wanted me angry, defensive, maybe even reckless. She wanted me to lash out so she could say, "See, he's the problem." But instead I smiled. Just a small, controlled smile. And then I stood. "Thank you, Karen," I said evenly, my voice calm enough to cut through the tension without raising a decibel. "I appreciate your passion for the rules. I'd just like to point out one small thing." I opened my binder and held up 2 pages for the crowd to see: her cropped photo of my trash bin and the wide-angle shot from my security camera showing the bin was out for less than 5 minutes. A few heads tilted. "Here's another," I continued, flipping to the mailbox complaint. One page was her email claiming non-compliance. The other was the HOA handbook with no mention of mailbox finishes. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just presented facts. Calm, simple, undeniable. Karen sputtered, trying to regain control. "Those are taken out of context." I held up another page before she could finish the transcript from the potluck, her words about keeping the neighborhood from becoming like certain parts of town. The room went silent again, but this time the silence had shifted. It was no longer against me. It was against her. Karen's face flushed crimson. She tried to laugh it off, but the sound cracked. "This is ridiculous. You're twisting my words." "I don't need to twist them," I replied smoothly. "They stand perfectly fine on their own." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from the back of the room, Mr. Whitaker cleared his throat. "He's right," the old man said. "I've lived here 30 years, and I've never seen someone singled out like this." Megan nodded, her voice shaky but firm. "It doesn't feel fair." Others murmured in agreement. The tide was turning, and Karen knew it. Her smirk faltered, her eyes darting, searching for support she suddenly didn't have. She slammed her clipboard shut. "This meeting is adjourned," she snapped, storming toward the door. Her heels clicked like gunshots against the tile, echoing down the hall as she fled. I sat back down my binder, resting calmly on the table. Around me, neighbors exchanged glances, some sheepish, some apologetic. No one said much, but I could feel the shift. Karen had overplayed her hand. As the room emptied, Megan paused by my chair. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not losing your cool." I nodded. Sometimes the best way to fight is to let the other person talk. She smiled faintly, then left. I gathered my binder and walked out into the night air. The crickets were loud, the stars bright, and my house, my home, stood solid and proud at the end of the street. Karen thought she'd humiliate me. Instead, she'd shown everyone exactly who she was. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Karen didn't show her face the morning after the HOA meeting. For once, her golf cart sat idle, the clipboard absent from its throne. But I knew better than to think she'd given up. People like her don't surrender, they scheme. Sure enough, by evening, an email pinged into my inbox: formal violation summary, immediate action required. It was 10 pages long. 10, every photo cropped, every accusation exaggerated, every word dripping with her attempt to bury me under paper. I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and read each line with the calm of a surgeon. Her overreach was spectacular. She had accused me of hosting unauthorized gatherings because Megan had stopped by to drop off a pie. She flagged my security lights as blinding even though they were HOA approved. She even claimed my recycling bin attracted pests, despite video showing it sealed and spotless. Every complaint screamed desperation. That was when I knew it was time to escalate. I opened my laptop and logged into the portal for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. My HUD contact, a soft-spoken investigator named Daniels, had been waiting for me to submit the full complaint. I uploaded everything: emails, photos, videos, transcripts. I didn't just give them Karen's words, I gave them her patterns. A harassment timeline that painted her like an artist who only knew one color: prejudice. Daniels called the next morning. "I've reviewed what you sent," he said. "This isn't just harassment. This looks like discrimination based on race and misuse of HOA authority. We'll be opening a case." I smiled, sipping my coffee. "Glad to hear it. And Daniels, don't worry about evidence, she's still writing it for me." The investigation moved quietly. HUD agents don't storm in with sirens. They observe, collect, interview. Over the next 2 weeks, unfamiliar cars parked on the street. Strangers with polite smiles knocked on neighbors' doors asking questions. Some people shrugged them off. Others finally spoke. I saw Megan talking at length, hands gesturing nervously. Even Mr. Whitaker gave them time, leaning on his cane as he pointed toward Karen's house. Karen noticed, of course. One afternoon, she cornered me near my driveway, eyes sharp with suspicion. "There are people asking questions," she said. "Government people. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" I leaned against my car and gave her a smile so calm it rattled her. "Karen, if government people are around, I'm sure they have their reasons." Her jaw tightened. "You think you're clever, don't you?" "I don't think it," I said. "I know it." She stormed off, muttering under her breath. Her paranoia pushed her into even more reckless behavior. She started sending group emails to the entire HOA board full of half-truths and outright lies about me. "This resident poses a danger to our neighborhood stability. We must act before the property values collapse." She CC'd everyone, certain she was rallying allies. Instead, she was putting her discrimination in writing CC by CC. One email even included a line that made my skin prickle. "This community was never meant for people like him." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Every time she hit send, she tightened the knot she'd built for herself. Then came the day HUD made contact with her directly. I know because the next morning she showed up at my property line, red-faced and trembling. She didn't even bother with her usual sugar-coated introduction. "You called them," she hissed. I folded my arms. "I don't know what you're talking about. You think you can ruin me. You think your little complaints mean anything." She jabbed a finger in my direction. "You don't belong here, and I'm going to prove it." I let the silence stretch, then leaned closer. "Karen, let me give you some free legal advice when you're in a hole. Stop digging." The look on her face was priceless confusion tangled with rage. She wanted to scream, but all she could do was stomp back to her house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. What she didn't know was that I'd already begun preparing the second stage of my plan, the reveal. You see, up until now, Karen thought I was just a homeowner with some legal know-how. A nuisance she could eventually bully into leaving. But the truth, the real truth, was something she couldn't have imagined. I wasn't just another neighbor who happened to know the rules. I was a federal judge sworn to uphold the very laws she was trampling. And I was done being subtle. I drafted a letter to the HOA board formally requesting a hearing on the matter of harassment and discrimination. My tone was polite, my language professional, but every line carried weight. I cited federal statutes, HUD regulations, and case precedents. I made it clear the board wasn't just ignoring neighborhood squabbles anymore. They were ignoring potential civil rights violations. The date was set for the following Thursday. Word spread quickly. By the time I arrived at the clubhouse, the room was packed. Neighbors, board members, even a couple of HUD representatives seated quietly in the back. Karen strutted in last, her blazer even stiffer than before, her smile stretched thin. As the meeting began, she launched into her routine accusations, violations, threats of foreclosure. But this time her words fell flat. The neighbors weren't nodding. They were watching me, waiting. When she finally ran out of steam, I stood. "Thank you, Karen," I said, voice calm but strong. "You've been thorough in presenting your version of events. Now, with the board's permission, I'd like to present mine." I opened my binder. Page after page, I laid out the evidence. The cropped photos beside the wide-angle shots, the violation notices beside the handbook rules, the transcripts of her racist remarks, her emails to the board, her threats. Each piece stacked higher and higher until the truth towered over her flimsy lies. Karen sputtered, her pen clicking uncontrollably. "He's twisting everything. He's making me look Like exactly what you are, I interrupted. My voice didn't rise, but it cut like steel. A person who abuses authority to discriminate against someone because of the color of their skin. The room went silent. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my identification. I set it on the table where everyone could see. Federal judge, I said simply. And I've seen enough. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time since I'd moved in, she was speechless. And for the first time, the neighborhood saw me not as the man Karen tried to paint me as, but as the man I truly was. The tide had turned. The room was still buzzing from the reveal. My federal badge sat on the table, like a gavel dropped mid-sentence, silencing every whisper, every excuse. Neighbors leaned forward, eyes wide, as if suddenly realizing that the man Karen had been mocking and humiliating for weeks wasn't just another homeowner. He was someone with real power, the kind of power that didn't swing a clipboard but carried the weight of federal law. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She tried to laugh, but it came out shrill. This is absurd. He's lying. He can't be a judge. Look at him. And there it was. The final nail in her coffin. She couldn't even help herself. The racism slipped out, naked, no sugarcoating, no polite pretense. Just the raw prejudice that had been simmering since the day I unloaded boxes onto my porch. A murmur of disgust ran through the crowd. Megan shook her head. Mr. Whitaker muttered a sharp, shameful. The HUD investigators scribbled notes furiously. I took my time. Years on the bench had taught me that silence can be louder than any speech. I let her words hang there, let everyone hear them echo in their own minds. Then slowly I picked up my badge, slid it back into my pocket, and straightened. I don't need to prove myself to you, Karen, I said evenly. But tonight I needed this community to see what you really are. And now they do. The HOA board shifted nervously, the weight of potential liability sinking in. One of the board members, a thin man named Alan, cleared his throat. Sir, what exactly are you suggesting we do? I opened my binder again, turning to the final section. I've already filed a complaint with HUD. You'll be hearing from them formally soon. But as for tonight, you have a choice. You can continue to let Karen run this HOA like her personal kingdom, or you can vote to remove her immediately before this board becomes complicit in her actions. The room exploded into chatter. Neighbors who had once cowered under Karen's rule were suddenly emboldened. Lucy from across the street spoke up, her voice trembling but clear. She's been bullying all of us for years. He's just the first one strong enough to fight back. Another neighbor added, she fined me $200 for leaving a bike on my porch for one afternoon. I paid it because I was scared. Same here, someone else said. She told me my shutters weren't regulation color, but they'd been the same for 10 years. The floodgates opened. One by one, people confessed their grievances, their voices gaining strength as they realized they weren't alone. Karen stood frozen, her clipboard clutched against her chest like a shield full of holes. Finally, Alan raised his hands. Order, please. We'll put this to a vote right now. All those in favor of removing Karen as HOA president, hands shot up. 1, 2, then nearly every person in the room. The only ones who didn't raise their hands were Karen herself and her neighbor buddy Marlene, who looked like she regretted it, even as she did it. Alan nodded grimly. The motion passes. Effective immediately. Karen, you are relieved of your duties as HOA president. The gasp Karen let out was almost theatrical. You can't do this. I built this community. I kept it clean, safe. You kept it scared. I interrupted, my voice sharp now, no longer gentle. You terrorized people under the guise of rules. You weaponized an HOA, meant to protect property values, and turned it into a tool for your prejudice. That ends tonight. She trembled, her face blotched red. You'll regret this, she hissed at me. I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. No, Karen, you will. The hearing didn't end there. The HUD investigators asked to speak with the board privately. They carried folders, took statements, and reminded everyone that federal housing law wasn't just a suggestion, it was binding. By the time the meeting adjourned, the board was shaken, the neighbors were whispering like schoolkids after a fire drill, and Karen was gone. She'd stormed out mid-discussion, heels clattering like gunshots, her threat still ringing in the air. I stepped outside into the cool night. The crickets hummed, the street lamps buzzed faintly. For the first time since I'd moved in, I felt a strange kind of peace. Neighbors who once avoided my gaze now approached me. Thank you, Megan said softly, for standing up. For all of us. Mr. Whitaker patted my shoulder. About damn time somebody cut her down to size. I smiled, tired but satisfied. Justice always takes time, I said, but it always comes. In the days that followed, the ripples spread. Karen's empire crumbled piece by piece. The HOA board formally stripped her of her authority, and she faced hefty fines for misusing HOA funds. Rumors swirled that HUD was preparing an even bigger case against her, one that could cost her more than just money. Neighbors began living easier. Kids played in front yards without fear of citations. Bikes leaned against porches again. Trash bins weren't treated like contraband. The air felt lighter, freer. Karen, meanwhile, grew quiet. Her once constant golf cart patrol vanished. The clipboard disappeared. Curtains, drawn blinds closed her house, looked more like a bunker than a home. But I knew this wasn't just the end of Karen. It was a reminder. Power built on fear always collapses when someone stands up to it, and sometimes it takes just one person to strike the match. For weeks, people still whispered, "Did you hear? He's a federal judge." Some looked at me with awe, others with gratitude. But I didn't need admiration. All I'd wanted from the beginning was respect, the simple kind every human being deserves regardless of color, creed, or title. And that at last I had. Karen mocked me for my skin. She thought she could strip me of dignity with her smirks and fines. Instead, she stripped herself of everything she clung to. The trial wasn't over, HUD would see to that. But the verdict in our little neighborhood had already been delivered, and justice for once felt right at home. In the weeks after the vote, the neighborhood felt like a different place entirely. For the first time since I moved in, I could walk down the street without feeling eyes drilling into my back. The ever-present hum of Karen's golf cart was gone, replaced by the sound of kids riding their bikes freely, their laughter echoing off the manicured lawns she once policed like a tyrant. Neighbors who had barely nodded at me before suddenly found reasons to stop by. Megan brought another pie this time, without the nervous glances over her shoulder. "It feels lighter here," she admitted, standing on my porch. "Like we can finally breathe." Mr. Whitaker waved every morning, his salute crisp, as if to say, "Job, well done, soldier." Even the young couple down the block who'd kept to themselves invited me for coffee, confessing that Karen had fined them for hanging a pride flag last year. "We didn't think anyone would stand up to her," they said. "You did what we couldn't." Karen, meanwhile, had shrunk into the shadows. Her curtains stayed drawn, her once manicured lawn now a little overgrown. Without the HOA funds she used to leverage for her pet projects, her house looked oddly ordinary, just another suburban home with peeling trim and weeds sprouting through the cracks in the driveway. The queen bee had lost her hive and no one missed the sting. But HUD didn't forget. Investigators continued their work quietly, gathering testimonies, reviewing every notice and email Karen had ever sent. They interviewed me twice more, asking for clarification on timelines and motives. Each time I provided exactly what they needed. Facts, not fury. Evidence, not emotion. The law doesn't reward anger, it rewards precision. And when the formal letter finally arrived, HUD v. Karen Mitchell, discrimination and abuse of authority, I read it with a satisfaction deeper than any fine or eviction notice she'd ever handed me. Justice wasn't just local anymore, it was federal. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold, Megan joined me. "I don't know how you stayed so calm," she said. "If it were me, I would have snapped." I chuckled softly. That's the thing about people like Karen. They want you to snap. They want you to yell to break, to prove their prejudice right. The hardest thing to do, the most powerful thing, is to stay steady. Let them destroy themselves with their own words. She nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think she'll ever change?" I looked across the street where Karen's blinds quivered like a nervous heartbeat. Change, maybe. But people like her rarely look inward. They'd rather blame the world than see the mirror. What matters is that the rest of us change. That we stop letting silence be the same as agreement. Life moved on. The neighborhood started small traditions, block parties, barbecues, even a little library box someone built at the corner. Without Karen's iron grip, people felt free to live, to decorate their porches with flowers or flags, to let their kids chalk up the sidewalks without fearing a violation. And me, I went back to my routines. Morning jogs, evening walks, cases to preside over in court. Yet I carried something new, a quiet pride that I hadn't just won a personal battle, but helped free an entire neighborhood from fear. Sometimes justice doesn't look like a gavel pounding in a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like a community rediscovering its voice. Karen's downfall taught me more than I expected. It reminded me that prejudice isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides behind polite smiles and rules on paper. It reminded me that silence helps bullies more than it helps their victims. And it reminded me that the fight for dignity is never just about one person. It's about everyone watching, waiting, hoping someone will finally stand up. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Never underestimate the power of patience, preparation, and truth. And never ever let someone convince you that you don't belong. Karen mocked me for my skin. She tried to erase me with her clipboard and her threats. But in the end, she erased herself. And now this neighborhood finally feels like home. If you've stayed with me to the end of this story, here's what I want you to remember. Life will always put people like Karen in your path. People who believe rules and prejudice. Give them the right to belittle you, to make you feel small, to push you out of spaces you've earned. But dignity isn't something they can take, it's something you carry within you, no matter how many fines, threats, or insults they throw your way. The true victory here wasn't just exposing Karen. It was proving that a whole community can rise above fear when one person refuses to back down. It was showing that silence isn't safety, and standing up doesn't just free you, it frees everyone around you who's been quietly suffering too. So if you've ever felt out of place, if you've ever been told directly or indirectly that you don't belong, remember my story. Remember that sometimes the most powerful strike back isn't anger, but calm persistence, evidence, truth, justice. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever faced someone like Karen? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments. I promise your story might give someone else the courage they need. And don't forget, if you want more stories like this, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, Karen's stories aren't going away anytime soon.